in Alabama. So he's got Auburn fans calling in that are just dancing on the grave because Auburn's now having a great season with the way that it's ending up. And again, we're talking about another team. Let's go ahead. We're moving right into.
As we talk about that, I'll say this: if Auburn beats Alabama, then I think that then there's a conversation.
I'm just saying that they're crazy. The crazy fans that literally live to call into these drive time talk shows are already saying that he needs to be fired. They need to find his house. It needs to be firebombed. We need to get him the hell out of Tuscaloosa. You can't bring that West Coast ball down to Alabama and think that you're going to be the number one coach and have the number one quarterback in the entire country. We can't win big boy football like that.
Whether you like it or not, Alabama, Nick Saban is not walking through that fucking door again. Okay? He's not. He's not going to. There's only one coach that could match his level of prestige and aura and everything, and he doesn't want to coach college football anymore because he doesn't have the patience for that. That's Bill Belichick. You're not going to get anybody in the market right now because, look, if you're an Alabama fan, would you really consider Deion Sanders? Like, do you really think that you could fucking deal with that? I don't think so. Okay, like I don't think that they would be able to deal with that.
Put himself through that either.
I don't think you exactly. Like, there's not, unfortunately, unless you try to go steal Kurt Cignetti, which obviously, look, great coach. Don't get me wrong, but this is his first year at Indiana, and he's had a great tenure. What was the thing with DeBoer? He goes to Washington, has a great year, and then they pull him away, and now we're realizing, okay. It takes time. It takes time to figure out how to beat good football teams, good football programs. And so I'm not pumped. I'm not like I said, if they lose to Auburn this weekend, then that conversation is very, very real. I'm dead serious.
They almost did it last year. They almost.
I know they did. And after what Auburn did against Texas A&M, it's not out of the question. It's not out of the question.
And that's another in-state. So we have. I forgot about that one, but Texas, we're getting the first Texas A&M game in 13 years, and Texas A&M has now played themselves where they're no longer in conference championship contention because of what they did against Auburn, but they still have the ability. Texas has not sealed their spot in that championship game. The only one that I believe has is Georgia. I think if Georgia beats Georgia Tech, they're definitely in the conference championship game. Texas is one thing that Texas A&M would like to do in this season, but I don't necessarily know what we're going to be talking about with Michigan and Ohio State. Michigan would live off of being able to end the season poorly for Ohio State. You're not knocking them out of the playoff, but you're at least not giving them a chance to go play in the conference championship. That would be good enough for them. I don't know if Texas A&M is that way, because if you know anything about Texas A&M, and the reason why they have all of this, negative media, negative publicity, is because they're the Dallas Cowboys of college football. They constantly say that it's their year. They spend more money. They have the boosters that have all the oil money. So that's where all of the Texas money is. And they are just the most annoying ass people, annoying fan base, the rally leaders. Everybody hates them. There's a reason why Texas A&M is as hated as they are. I don't know if Texas A&M is going to bring that attitude that they're going to need to. You have to come into this game only hoping to play spoiler.
Calling Texas A&M Dallas Cowboys is giving them way too much credit. Let me put it that way. Texas A&M is the Chicago Bears, where they tried to get away from the Packers and being under that shadow of being Texas. Like, for instance, moving to the SEC before Texas did, trying to become that big thing. Had that Johnny Manziel run, had that Rex Grossman Super Bowl run where you thought you were hot shit and everything, and then you got back down to reality where you're not that hot shit. Look, I will stand on the fact that the Dallas Cowboys are still the Texas Longhorns. Like, until they win a national championship and prove it wrong, they're still going to be the most overhyped team. But, like, if you're A&M, and like you talked about this 4 or 5 weeks ago, that A&M is going to win the SEC championship. I knew that they're going to come down to earth because of how good the other teams in the SEC are that they're not fully prepared for. So, like I said, look, I'll talk about more when we get to the bench warmers of the week. But there's teams that punch their ticket to a fucking bowl game, but that's it. You're not getting the college football playoff. You punch your ticket to a bowl game, and good for you for doing that. But your playoff chances are on life support, and you need a lot of shit to happen. Is all I'm gonna say.
No, they've ended up doing what I hoped that they wouldn't do. I trying to be smart, and I took a swing. Didn't work out the way that I wanted it to. Looking at around, let's talk about this Ohio State-Michigan game, because that is going to be – it's the first one that kicks off. It's taking place at noon. It's in the Horseshoe. We always know – I put it in our document. Right now, the money line is minus 2,000 for Ohio State. It is plus 4,000 for Michigan. It is a 21-point spread. But the thing about this game is that it normally gets played about 2 touchdowns, whatever the spread is. When it's this big, it normally gets played down to about a touchdown game. I don't necessarily know if Ohio State, now they can, because they're talented enough to do it. And Michigan this season has not been able to stand up to anything, but they have not played a team that they hate as much as they hate Ohio State. So they can end up winning by 3 touchdowns. But what I was saying last night is they're going to have to weather an early emotional storm in Ohio State from Michigan. Same thing that they did against Indiana. So I think that the Indiana game being where it was is actually a blessing in disguise. And then you're just going to see the talent. I don't know if they're going to be able to run the ball, but you'll be able to see Will Howard get the ball out in space, get the ball to the sidelines. I see them using a very similar strategy as what Texas was using against Michigan, where you're just throwing constantly to the outsides to get those NFL tackles that Michigan has to run and get tired. And then when they come out, you got to use that makeshift offensive line that sucked ass at running the football, and you got to start feeding Travion Henderson and Judkins. If you don't establish a running game in this game, you cannot expect to establish a running game in the Big Ten Conference Championship. And that means you will not be able to establish a running game into the playoffs. This team, as good as they have been running the football, sucks at running the football this season. That is the one thing that I can stand on. It's statistically there. It is objectively true. They cannot run the football this year. Can you fix that this weekend against your biggest rival? And can you show me that that's what you're going to be able to do in the postseason? Because that's what travels in these big games.
And it's the offensive line play with the injuries that Ohio State has to help that, because obviously they have probably the most talented running back, or one of the most talented running backs in the country. I would say top 5 easily when Quinshon Judkins. And Travion Harrison is no slouch either. Like, they're 2 great weapons that you can use in the passing game as well as use in the running game. The offensive line injuries, having those guys, having the right tackle, maybe it was the left tackle, go down with an injury that ended his season a couple weeks back, did not help. Like, that's the biggest downfall for this Ohio State team is, yes, you have Ibuka, yes, you have Jeremiah Smith out there to make great plays weapon wise, but like when you get into the trenches, are you able to do that? Because, like I said, going into Michigan, it's not easy. It is not easy for anybody. And Michigan, it's been 3-4 years, right? 3-4 years now, like since 21, maybe it was 2020 exactly.
It wasn't 2020, because that was the year Michigan decided they had the COVID. Ohio State fans like me for doing this. They had the COVID outbreak the week before the game was supposed to happen, that COVID season, and it didn't actually get played. So that's technically Ryan Day's one win as a head coach against Michigan. He's had 4 other tries and has failed.
This is as good of a chance as you'll ever get. Obviously, Michigan has struggled. If you lose this game, I'm not going to say that Ohio State's national championship hopes are dead, but I do think that I am second guessing of who they when they play against good teams, especially SEC level teams. I'll second guess picking them in the bracket when they have to play a Georgia team, when they have to play possibly an Alabama team, when they have to play some of these other teams that you can't get over your little brothers. It's going to make it very, very difficult.
I'm not saying that they have, like, objectively, no, they don't have a chance, but they always have a chance with the way that this game ends up going. There's been countless examples. I rewatched the documentary that they did on this rivalry. There's countless examples of one of the 2 teams coming in with not a great season, not having anything to play for. But this is like I said, if you've never had a rivalry up to that magnitude, if you've never hated something that much where you can literally take their toy and feel great about taking their toy, knowing that you don't get to keep it, but they just don't get to have it, that is where this game gets. It's a great feeling. Germans have a word for this. It's called Schadenfreude. You feel Schadenfreude when you have joy in the misery of somebody else. And Michigan can take a lot of joy in the misery that they would cause in Columbus, Ohio, especially because guess what? They're the defending national champions still. Until somebody wins, they're obviously not the same team. But then, we didn't need to steal your signs. We didn't need Jim Harbaugh to beat you. We are just that dominant over you. There's a lot that Michigan's playing for.
Auburn and Michigan are playing like the game, as they call it, and then obviously the Iron Bowl are probably two of the biggest rivalry games in the country, and I think there's no denying that. And both sides of the lesser side, in terms of Auburn and Michigan, have a very great opportunity just to ruin seasons. That's what makes these games so dangerous. Like during like a week 4, week 5 game against a rivalry game, like an Texas or Oklahoma game, you don't think that if Texas Oklahoma was last game of the week that Texas would be shitting their pants right now? as opposed to Texas versus Texas A&M after what Oklahoma just did against
Alabama.
against Alabama. Like that game earlier in the season meant nothing, and Texas just was able to roll over them and just beat them to a pulp. This rivalry week adds that element of we're here to do one thing, and that's ruin every single person in that stands and every single fan of this opponent, that team up north or that team in opposing colors. That you're just like I want to ruin that season because they have to wait 365 days to get retribution.
You have the ability to make 100,000 people cry, and you get to see it. You have the ability because they're playing in Ohio State. So not only are you down, this is the worst team that you've had in this last little 3-year stretch that you've been better than this team, but you'd have the ability to send them home at home. You have to wait until the playoffs. You have to wait and see if you're going to be an at-large bid. We all know that it is, but now I'm putting doubt in your mind. I got that little bit. I'm still that devil sitting on your shoulder. I'm your anxiety that's going to stick with you for the rest of that time. Oh, and you're right. If that does happen, whenever we're talking about Ohio State in the playoff, well, hopefully the Ohio State doesn't. Ohio State against Michigan doesn't show up.
A loss against Michigan does not take Ohio State out of the playoff. It does not take them out of the playoff. It absolutely doesn't. But it will hurt their chances of they like having that extra game. I cannot emphasize enough. We look at this in the NFL landscape. That extra week that the bye weeks teams have in the NFL playoffs helps a team so much. And if you take that team away from conference championship where they have to face we just talked a lot of shit about the Big 12 and how poor it is. That's not going to be. It's another week of hitting bodies, struggling through it. That you don't try to get healthy. That could hurt Ohio State. And it's
going to hurt your confidence. It's going to tear your confidence. Right now, your confidence is sky high.
Exactly. And I'll keep going back to this because I think that Auburn has a great chance, as good of a chance of beating Alabama as Michigan does of Ohio State. And they have had such a poor season. Auburn and Michigan both, but such poor seasons that they finally have gotten hot at the right time. Obviously, Auburn with the Texas A&M win past weekend and a couple of big wins as well throughout the second half of the season. Like, where you look in this game, you're like, Alabama's not in the playoff if they lose to Auburn. Ohio State is not in the Big Ten championship if they lose to Michigan. This is your chance to prove the world and prove to your rivals that you are. That we are not pushovers. That this is not this that we're still here, no pun intended, and that you can still be who best of the best, no matter how bad of recruiting turn you had, no matter how bad of a season that you've had, you can still compete with the best of the best, and that's what makes college football in terms of this level of play, this level of bracket, that much more exciting.
No, I think that's where we're going to go to. I'm going to get the official, not the official, but what the bracket would be officially. They don't have any of the conference championships. They just go based off of what the tiebreakers would be at this point. But putting it up on the screen, I'm going to show you guys what the bracket is right now, where I have them. So in the first round, you have Arizona State picking up the Big 12 championship. They are the 12 seed, so the last conference champion in, the 4 with a bye. Oregon, Big 10 champion. Texas, the SEC champion, Miami, the ACC champion, then Boise out of the Mountain West. I had Notre Dame in the 5 spot where they put Ohio State. I actually flipped Ohio State and Oregon. I put Ohio State. If they win this weekend, I see them getting revenge in that round of the playoffs, so I put them as the number 1 seed. And my other first round matchups, I didn't have Tennessee, Georgia. I had Tennessee, Indiana as the 8-9, Indiana hosting in Bloomington. And then I had Oregon as the 6, taking on Miami as the 11 after they lose the ACC championship. And then I had Texas and Penn State in this 7-10 matchup where you see SMU and Notre Dame. With what you see on the screen here, what's the most exciting matchup that you see? Is it the Big Ten, that lower tier of the Big Ten that we're seeing, basically like the Big Ten B-side championship? Or is it one of these other matchups that we haven't necessarily seen? Like that would be first time Arizona State and Ohio State would be going at it. SMU, Notre Dame, 2 prestigious schools in the past, but haven't necessarily been that great. What's the biggest thing for you?
Well, looking at that bracket, the biggest thing that the takeaway I saw from that is that Texas may have the biggest walkthrough to the national championship I've ever seen. Unless Indiana or Penn State just get hot at the right time. If looking at this bracket, I am very confident SMU doesn't make the playoff if they don't win their ACC championship. I just, based upon what I saw of having them being Alabama being the next team out, if Alabama takes care of business this weekend, even if they don't get to the SEC championship, which they won't, even with the win this weekend, they're the last team in. And that means Alabama versus Notre Dame and Alabama, Texas in the second round. That is very, very scary if you're Texas, and that is the biggest hiccup you'll have against if you don't have to go through Georgia, if you don't have to go through Ohio State, if you have to go through Oregon on your way to the national championship. Like if Alabama is your biggest test going to the national championship, and I'm not giving Indiana and Penn State and Miami like that much slack, because Cam Ward and what those other two teams have shown can show that they can beat good teams still. Like there's 0-9 that. But like if you're Texas, you're licking your chops at this bracket. You are licking your absolute chops this bracket because you avoid a lot of scenarios. You avoid a lot of scenarios because I think
at
Texas,
this point, the way that it looks right now, you don't want the 1 seed.
Not necessarily 1 seed, but I think the 4 seed is the worst thing possible because I think Boise State needs to have the Miami lose because unfortunately what I saw with Boise State against Wyoming, like they're going to get their ass run through against the Big Ten loser. They're going to get their ass run through by the Big Ten loser. That 4 seed is the worst seed possible because that 5th seed technically is the second best team in the country that is not a conference champion. The next best team in the country that's not a conference champion. It could be a 2 seed. It could be a 3 seed. It could be the fucking – it could literally be anybody. It literally could be anybody. And if you're Boise State, that is a worst-case scenario. Boise State needs to try to get on the opposite side of the bracket, try to avoid that as much as possible, and try to get lucky.
They can't lose. That's the worst part about it. They can't lose and fix their –
They have to have Miami lose.
I had
–
so
Miami lose.
In the way I worked my things out, obviously I have Miami as the 11th seed. I have FSMU beating Miami, and they pick up one of those 3 at-large spots that we were saying were still available because I still think that Indiana, Penn State, those 2 are pretty much locks. Whoever loses the SEC and Big Ten championship are pretty much locks. And then Notre Dame, if they don't lose, I don't know if they play anybody this weekend, but if they don't lose, they're going to be right there. They're still going to make the bracket. Maybe it's just so that they can see kind of like how they made that 14th playoff that 1 year, just to see, yeah, if you don't play in a conference, you're actually not ready for this. You can't stand up to any of this.
And looking at that bracket, another thing I just thought about too is like if in a real scenario, in this very, very real scenario where Miami beats SMU and Alabama is that next team in, I feel very confident that Alabama could beat Notre Dame. Like there's and if they beat Notre Dame, I don't think it's out of the question they could beat Texas as well. And if they beat those 2 teams, there's still a chance DeBoer can go on a run. Yeah. There's still a very good chance that Alabama's still playing in a national championship.
That's why it's the crazy people in Alabama that are saying he shouldn't be the coach anymore. It's not the rational people, the scientists that they have living out in Alabama. The NASA scientists are like, there's still a path. But the crazies are thinking, we got to go poison the trees in Toomer's Corner, and then we also got to make sure that Kalen DeBoer's house is blown up with a pipe bomb. That's obviously very joking. They have not done anything like that. They have poisoned the trees, but they have not bombed anybody as of yet.
There's a real scenario, and frankly, if you're Alabama, like it could be best case scenario. Yeah. I'm serious. It could be best case scenario because if you avoid Ohio State, Oregon, Georgia, all that, like that's. I'm not saying it's a cakewalk, but that's best case scenario. It is. It's like walking into a field of pit bulls versus walking into a field of chihuahuas. You're not scared of either. Yeah, one of them might bite you, a chihuahua, but you're like, I'll kick you off and I'll be just fine. Pit bulls, you're like, fuck, one of these dudes are gonna fucking kill me, and it's going to be an absolute massacre. And it's going to be very, very bad. Like that's like. I think Ole Miss is dead too, but if you're Ole Miss, if you're Alabama, if you're one of those last teams, you're looking at your chops at that. If you're Tennessee, like you almost want to fall back, like you almost want to like not get stuck.
Why is Alabama? I don't know who's because thinking about it now, I don't know why Alabama. I get that Alabama has the prestige, but Ole Miss, if they don't lose again this weekend, has just the same. I guess they maybe have a couple, but you can't even say they have worse losses.
Yeah,
you can't even say that because. Bama beat LSU, but Bama lost and was close to South Carolina, who
they look pretty good. Obviously, they're not going to make it.
But I mean, they both have the best. They have the best win in the conference over Georgia, both of them. but they also have pretty bad losses in the most recent. It's weird. It's going to be strange. That's why I'm glad we have conference championship games, so we don't have to worry about tiebreakers and just get the best
we don't
teams
have to. There's zero doubt who the 4 buys are going to be. That's the best part of how this bracket is set up. Is like there's zero doubt who the 4 buys are going to be. Maybe there's an argument about who the 4th buy is going to be, if it's a Big 12 champion or if it's whatever. Like that may be the only conversation. But that's the best part about it. The automatic bids are perfect for this scenario.
Moving quickly just to get through the rest of this. So for my round 2, I had Indiana going to play the number 1 seed, Ohio State. I do have Ohio State beating them in the rematch, but I think that one would be closer if we get it in the playoff just because of the heightened stakes. I don't know if it's going to be a runaway victory, but I do think neutral site would be an interesting wrinkle. I had Texas going up against Georgia, and I think Texas gets them in the rematch. I think about that game, and Georgia's offense could not do anything against Texas's defense unless they had a short field. So I feel pretty decently about that matchup. Oregon, as my 6th seed, gets the win over Miami and then takes on SMU. I think they kill SMU if that happens because Oregon would, like we've been saying, probably the next best team in the country that just doesn't win their conference championship. And then I have Notre Dame taking on Boise, and I have Boise losing. So Boise gets the bye, but then they lose after taking on
Notre Dame making a semifinal run. That's interesting.
Oh, but then they get Ohio State in the next round. So my semis, there's Notre Dame, Ohio State. They're gone. Oregon, Texas. I do think Texas loses that game just because Dylan Gabriel outduels Quinn Ewers. So my championship is Oregon, Ohio State. We get that 3 times.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. I really don't. I almost want something different because I would love to see Texas get a run. I would love to see Georgia get a run. I don't know. I just don't know how I feel about that. Maybe, like I said, I want a Cinderella run. I want one. I want 2 6 and below teams in the conference or in the semifinals. That's all I'm asking for.
Oregon versus Texas, number 6 versus number 7.
Yeah.
Because they're both they would be the outside. They would be the conference losers of their conference championship. That means that Texas takes care of business in their in-state rivalry. Obviously, I've been having a lot of fun with these. If you have been pissed off,
just and this is just me thinking out of my head out of this. In these scenarios, if you're Oregon and Ohio State, if you're Texas and Georgia, do you not show as much in the conference championships? Like obviously you want that
the way that it's gonna work out.
But do you hold a few things back, and then if you're getting your ass kicked, you just at halftime you ship it in.
Here's the crazy thing though. Think back to that game that they've already played. Did Oregon really have that much? Did they hold anything back? I don't think they did. I don't think Ohio State held anything back either. That was a 35-34 game.
But the question is if you're and I'm knocking on wood that this doesn't happen, but football is a real sport and real injuries happen. If you push all your chips in the middle to win a conference championship, when you're Oregon, when you're Ohio State, when you're Tennessee, when you're Georgia, or when you're Texas, and you already know you're in the playoff, I feel like there's a real scenario where if a blowout happens in the first half, they're going to hold back and try not to get injured. I think that's a real scenario, unfortunately, that we may be seeing in these conference championships. Obviously, we hope that everyone will stay healthy and that we get a good game throughout, and it comes down to a 1-score game at the end to decide who gets a bye. But I think that there's a real world scenario. If one team gets down by 2 or 3 touchdowns at halftime, it's going to ship it in. It's going to ship it in and be like, you know what? The last case scenario, if Carson Beck gets injured, we're fucked. If Dylan Gabriel gets injured, we're fucked. You're not those teams may beat may beat a fucking SMU or may beat a Notre Dame, but they're not going to beat a Georgia again. They're not going to beat a Texas again if you're not fully healthy. So, it raises an interesting question.
No, it's a thought, and now that there's the seeding that doesn't go straight with who's the best team, who's the number 1 overall team in the country, there's probably going to be more teams that are thinking that way. And Dan Lanning's probably a guy that's already been thinking about that because I don't think that he's prepared for the end of that Ohio State game scenario if he doesn't think about that crazy shit that can happen. That's a lot of college football that we've already gotten into. Let's go ahead. I have quick nuggets.